Welcome to Tutorial 11, which picks up where we left off in Tutorial 10. So far in this tutorial series, we've focused on how many words in your text are covered by a given list, paying special attention to the orange words, those that aren't on the list and might need to be taught or explained. But we haven't yet looked closely at the covered words, those that are on the list. We've counted them, but we haven't explored which words they are, how they're grouped, or how often they appear. That's what this tutorial is all about. You'll learn how to use the download stats feature to turn your text into a detailed frequency list, organised by phlegmas, word families, or partial units. You'll be able to see how often each group and each individual word occurs, spot clusters of related vocabulary, and get a much clearer picture of your text's lexical demands. If terms like phlegma, word family, and partial unit are unfamiliar, or if you're not sure how the stats panel works, it's worth reviewing tutorials 4, 5, and 10 before starting this one. Today, I'll be profiling a German text from a past GCSE higher tier reading exam, designed for 16-year-old learners and benchmarked at CEFR A2 level. These exam papers are freely available to download from the AQA website. The copy-paste version needs a bit of tidying up to remove the formatting and the numbers, so I went ahead and did that already before I started filming. I'm just going to paste the clean version into the MultilingProfiler profiling window. The red Download Stats button becomes available whenever you choose to use either a curriculum list or a frequency list. The format of the downloadable output depends on the list type you choose, so I'm going to walk you through both, starting with the word frequency lists. Because this text is aimed at low intermediate learners, I'm choosing to profile using the 2000 band. I've kept all the inflected forms, but haven't added any derived forms. So we're going to be grouping words by phlegmas. As a reminder, that's the head word and all of its inflections. With this setting, the global coverage figure tells us that the top 2000 phlegmas cover 87.4% of the text, though we don't yet know how much of that coverage comes from the 1000 band and how much comes from the 2000 band. Looking at the statistics panel, we do get a few more clues about the composition of the text. Recapping what we learned in tutorial 10, the type token ratio is 0.7, which tells us there's a fair amount of variety, but also some repetition. Out of the 135 total words, there are about 95 unique forms, so we know for sure that about 40 forms are going to be repeats. But the ratio alone can't tell us whether that's one word that appears 40 times, 10 words that each appear 4 times, or some other combination of repeats. We also don't know which words are the repeated ones. Scrolling down to the word group statistics table, the word group being phlegmas in our case, we can see that 85.7% of the 135 words group into 72 phlegmas that fall within the 2000 most frequent words. This tells us that many of the words in this text share a common root form. In other words, we can expect to see grammatical variants of the same word. For example, verb tenses, person forms, or singular and plural nouns grouped under the same head word. So, the interface gives us a rough sketch. We know the text is fairly compact, with some repetition and some range, but we don't know which words are repeated or how often, and that's where the Download Stats button comes in handy. When you click on the button, MultilingProfiler generates a folder with 4 files, 3 spreadsheets with statistics about coverage, word groups, and multi-word units, and a README file that gives you a bit more information about the other 3 files. Let's start by opening the coverage statistics. I'm just going to make the columns a little bit wider before we start so you can see everything clearly. Okay, so these figures show how the words are spread across the frequency bands that you've selected, and also how much each frequency band is contributing to the overall coverage statistics that are shown on the interface. Looking at the word count figures, you'll see 106 of the individual words in the text, so 79% of the total 153 words are from the top 1000 phlegmas. 12 words, 9% of the total, are from the second 1,000, and 17 words, 13% of the total, are not in the top 2,000 at all. In terms of the word groups, we know that these 106 on-list words group together into 72 phlegmas, which means that 86% of the individual words in the text fall into a word group that is on the 2,000 word list. Of these 72 phlegmas, 63 are from Band 1, which is 75% of all the word groups in the text. 12 are in Band 2, grouping into 9 phlegmas, which adds another 11%. And there are 17 off-list words, which group into 12 groups, so we can expect there to be some repetition there too, about 5 repeated forms. But which words exactly do the figures refer to? To find out, let's open the word group statistics file. Column A shows the word group head words. Column B shows how often each group is represented in the text. Column C shows the frequency band for the group. So here, most groups are in Band 1, some are in Band 2, and a few are beyond Band 2. And column D lists the specific grammatical forms that come together to make up the count in column B, and, in brackets, individual counts for each form. This means that if we sort column B from highest to lowest, we get a frequency-ordered list of the words in your text. As you would expect, the top words are mainly function words, pronouns, the definite and indefinite articles, with their various gender and case forms, and also basic verbs like sein, to be, haben, to have, and machen, to make or do. These exist in a few different persons and tenses. There's also a character name, Jonas, and some key topic words like Gesundheit, health, fühlen, to feel, and gesund, healthy. So what does all this mean in practice? Well, based on what we know about frequency, so the fact that the most frequent words are the words that learners are most likely to encounter, and therefore the ones that they're most likely to learn, there are two main takeaways here. First, all of the off-list words are grouped together at the bottom of this frequency list. That gives you a handy shortcut for finding vocabulary that's likely to be unfamiliar. That's the vocabulary that you might want to gloss, to pre-teach, or to adapt. So for example, you could just take this list of words and use them to create a vocabulary pre-learning task for students to do before they read the text. Second, this feature helps you quickly spot the most frequent words in your text, those that might be central to the topic, or offer a useful opportunity to reinforce key grammar or vocabulary. For example, if gesund and Gesundheit appear repeatedly, the theme is clearly health, and you could build on that by introducing a near synonym like Wohlbefinden, for example, if you wanted to expand the student's lexical range. Or, if a high-frequency verb like machen comes up again and again, you might want to swap out one instance for a synonym like tun, or to rephrase the sentence for variety. Also, this feature can make grammar patterns more visible. Looking at the verb forms here, you'll see it's mostly the first and second person forms that are used in the text. Notice that in the sein group, there's only one form, war, the past tense form, was, which appears 4 times. If you wanted to introduce a bit more variety, you could tweak one of these. For example, instead of saying, als Kind war ich stundenlang an der frischen Luft, as a child, I was outside for hours, you could try, als Kinder waren wir, as children, we were, so that the text also practices some plural verb forms. Now let's see what happens when we change some of the settings. First, let's change the word group unit from phlegmas to word families. As we saw in tutorial 5, you can do this by clicking on Add Derived Forms and choosing Select All. Doing this slightly increases the coverage and also reduces the number of word groups, because some phlegmas, which were derived words like Gesundheit from gesund, have now grouped together to form a single family. I explain more about that in tutorial 10. If we click on Download Stats again, it generates a new set of files for these settings. If we open the updated word group stats file and again sort it by the number of occurrences, we can see that the fourth most frequent word group is now the gesund word family, so health. It now includes gesund, healthy, ungesund, unhealthy, and Gesundheit, health, which was a separate phlegma before. Grouping words by word family like this can be a useful way to spot clusters of related vocabulary, helping you see the topic focus more clearly and teaching students about common roots and derivational patterns. If you've deselected certain forms, for example the suffix heit, then Gesundheit will be counted separately again. The profiler will adjust the stats files automatically every time you change your selections. Now let's shift gears slightly and try profiling the same text using the 5,000 word band, as if we were trying to align it with an advanced learner. At this level, the overall coverage rises, of course, to nearly 92%. When we click Download Stats, the files reflect that change. When we open the coverage statistics file, we can now see the data spread across 5 bands instead of across 2. There's still a strong contribution from the top 2,000 words, but we're also now seeing a small percentage of words coming from the 3,000, 4,000, and 5,000 bands. In the word group statistics file, the bottom end of the list looks a little bit different too. Words that were formerly off list have now been reclassified, and anything that falls outside the top 5,000 rather than the top 2,000 is now grouped under the label more than 5. What about the final file in the folder, Multiword Statistics? You'll notice that this file is blank by default. That's because it only populates if you've manually added multi-word phrases to your extended list. Let's add a few now to see how that looks. Adding multi-word units to the extended list tells the profiler to treat certain word combinations as fixed expressions, so chunks that learners are expected to understand, even if they can't fully unpack each part. For example, Mitglied eines Segelclubs, member of a sailing club, contains a tricky genitive construction. An der Uni, at uni, uses an unusual preposition, and fühle mich and fühlt sich, feel and feels, are reflexive in German, but not in English. Since fühle mich and fühlt sich are forms of the same expression, sich fühlen, we can group them together as a multi-word unit family under that headword. We covered how this kind of grouping works in tutorial 10. If we go ahead and reprofile and download the stats again, the multi-word statistics file will show these forms grouped together under their shared headwords, again ordered by frequency, just like the equivalent file for individual words. Note that the multiling stats file is separate from the regular word statistics data, which will continue to count the component parts of these multi-word units as separate words. As you might remember from tutorial 10, multi-word items affect the global coverage statistic, but not the individual word frequencies. And that's why they appear in their own separate file here. Finally, let's see how things change if we switch from a frequency list to a curriculum list. For example, the GCSE higher tier listening list. Curriculum lists are not organised by frequency bands, so the words are simply marked as on list or off list, and the coverage statistics are a bit simpler. So here we see 119 individual words that are on list, and those cover 88% of the text. These words group into 74 word groups. This time they're partial units based on the specific grammatical forms allowed by the GCSE syllabus. In the word group statistics, you'll see the frequency band column has disappeared. It's been replaced with a simple yes or no to just mark whether or not each word group is on the list. And in column D, you'll only see grammatical forms that are listed in the syllabus. If they're not on the syllabus, they'll appear as separate words. The multi-word file works exactly the same way as before. To learn more about coverage, vocabulary selection, and strategies for handling unknown words in multi-word units, check the links below this video for short summaries published in the OASIS database.